So I think, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kick off. My name is Seán. I'm a committee member here of the Energy, Environment, Climate Action Division. And we're going to talk this evening about district heating and progress to date in Ireland. And we've two very good speakers here. We have Dearbhla Stapleton from SEAI, and we have Seán Kinsella from Department of Environment, Climate Action and Communications. So without any further ado, we're going to start the proceedings. So I'm just introducing Seán first. Seán is a principal officer at the Department of Climate Action, Environment and Communications. He leads the Renewable Energy Heat Delivery Division. And this division is responsible for funding and development of district heat networks across Ireland. So Seán works very closely with the Renewable Heat Policy Division, who are responsible for developing the legislation for district heat networks. So some of you may be aware, we've had the Heads of a Heat Bill published in November 2024, and the programme for government published not 2 weeks ago has highlighted developing the legislation for district heat in 2025. So handing over to Seán for his presentation.
Thanks, Donald. Yes, so my name is Seán Kinsella. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for joining. As Donald said, this evening I want to cover off how government is supporting district heating, how we're trying to develop the project pipeline of district heating projects in Ireland, and I want to also give you guys an overview of how legislation that will underpin district heating development in Ireland is developing. I'll give you a flavour of what's included in the heat bill at the moment. But first, I'll just kick off with a bit of policy and how policy for district heating has developed over the last number of years. Just in relation to decarbonisation of the built environment, progress is being made, but obviously Ireland isn't where we want to be. We're still heavily reliant on gas and oil for our heating, and we're actually bottom of the table for renewable heat deployment in Europe. And if you look at some of the other European countries that are doing particularly well, you always see that they have, or most of them have district heating in their mix. There's actually about 70 million people currently in the EU serviced by district heating, which is a huge number. So as I said, just a little bit of background policy development. So the deployment of district heating at scale, particularly in densely populated areas of Ireland, is a key government objective under the Climate Action Plan, and is a key component of the built environment. The sectoral emission ceilings. And district heating has been included in the Climate Action Plan going back to 2019. 2021 version of the Climate Action Plan, set out a range of actions to support the expansion of district heating and addressing barriers to district heating rollout in Ireland. The 2023 version of the Climate Action Plan reaffirms the government's commitment to district heating, and they set a target of 2.7 terawatt hours of district heating rollout by 2030. This is reaffirmed then in 2024, and it'll do so again in 2025. The SEAI National Heat Study has been a particularly important document in relation to policy development in Ireland. The research presented in the report highlights the significant potential for district heating in Ireland, and they had a figure of over 50% potential in relation to district heating. So for decarbonisation of our buildings in relation to heat demand in Ireland. And actually CODEMA, which is the Dublin's energy agency, identified that collectively there are enough waste heat and renewable sources in Dublin to heat over 1 million homes, and that approximately 80% of heat demand in Dublin could be met by district heating by 2050. Now, these are obviously huge figures. They'd be quite difficult to achieve, to get to every bit of that, but it just shows you that there's significant potential for district heating in Ireland. The Climate Change Advisory Council, they've done a 2024 review, specifically in relation to the built environment. They noted that an urgent need to reduce and ultimately phase out Ireland's fossil fuels and replace heating systems with low carbon alternatives, such as heat pumps, but also district heating systems. And a key recommendation was to complete the heat policy the legislation reform necessary to accelerate the delivery of district heating in Ireland. The National Planning Framework is another important one. The strategic outcome of the framework states that district heating networks will be developed where technically feasible and most effective to assist in meeting renewable heat targets and reduce Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this sets a very good basis for the development of district heating in Ireland and complements the legislation, the heat bill for district heating as well. And what you see is that can then trickle down to the regional, county and local development plans. In addition to obviously policy in Ireland, you also have the EU directives. The Renewable Energy Directive notes that modern renewable-based efficient district heating and cooling systems have demonstrated their potential to provide cost-effective solutions for integrating renewable energy while facilitating the overall decarbonisation of the heating system and cooling sector. And then a particularly important one is the Energy Efficiency Directive, which includes an update to the criteria to be met by, or how you can classify efficient district heating and cooling systems. So the District Heating Steering Group report, so the 2021 Climate Action Plan, there was a decision made to establish a steering group to advise government to coordinate the development of district heating policy and to overcome any barriers in relation to district heating in Ireland. And it brought together subject matter experts, experts in renewable heating, energy, land use, planning, energy regulation, local government and finance. And they published a report in 2023. They brought it to government in July 2023 and it was published in August of that year. And just some of the recommendations are just kind of bunched them together in 4 categories there. So obviously a key one was legislation and the regulatory framework for district heating. So they recognise that the absence of legislation and regulation was a key barrier to the mobilisation of district heating, whether it's private or public sector in Ireland. Primary legislation will be required to ensure that developers of district heating projects have the necessary legal powers to operate the sector, and also crucially to facilitate regulatory provisions, to protect customers, as well as putting in place licensing and consenting provisions for district heating operators. They also say that legislation should mandate the public sector buildings connect to district heating, which is an important one, and that industrial facilities supply waste heat to district heating networks. There was also put forward that there was a need to establish a centre of excellence. I won't go into too much detail on this one. I know Dearbhla is going to cover that off, but this has been established last year and it's up and running, and they're doing great work already. And then crucially, financial support was particularly important for the rollout in relation to district heating in Ireland. You've got obviously large upfront costs for district heating and low rates of return for district heating. And this is very much what we see. This isn't just in Ireland, but this is also from international experience. So state support would be likely to facilitate the delivery of early projects due to high capital outlay and uncertain nature of customer connections. And DEC and SEAI were to carry out a review of supports for renewable heat production, such as the support scheme for renewable heat, and redesign it where necessary for district heating. So that gave you kind of a background where we are in relation to policy and how it's developed over the last number of years. What I want to go through now is how we're implementing that, and we're really taking a 3-pronged approach. Legislation to underpin district heating development, including regulation, supporting district heating through funding, and then we're trying to develop projects as well where we can. So in relation to legislation, so the general scheme of the proposed heat bill was proposed by government, was approved by government last year, in October last year, which is an important point for district heating development in Ireland. So the development of this legislation will pave the way for the growth of district heating industry in Ireland, and will be highly efficient and low carbon. We're undergoing full drafting at the moment, and as you've seen from the programme of government, the aim is to get that over the line in 2025. And I just picked out a couple of elements of the heat bill that I thought was that would be of interest. First of all, ensure price protection for customers. So it's going to be a regulated industry. The Commission for Regulation of Utilities will be the regulator, and to ensure no anti-competitive practice and promoting competition. Ensure networks remain technology agnostic. and also, of course, has to be from renewable energy sources. Put in place vulnerable customer register and dispute resolution processes, and also price regulation methodologies. So while the provisions within the general scheme are mainly targeted at large-scale renewable district heating networks, there's also a need to ensure price regulation across all heat networks, and this will include the smaller scale communal heating networks is an added requirement of the bill. The next one is to provide licensing regime. So again, the CRU will be the licensing authority for heat networks in Ireland, and the Commission to develop a licensing regime for the purpose of the development or construction, operation or supply of energy to heat networks. There should be also a single licensing system that will be established again by the heat network for heat network developers, operators and suppliers, and the licensee must comply with the technical standards for district heating as set out by the heat network regulator, ensuring that security of supply for customers is in place. And also a supplier of last resort, very similar to the gas network and the electricity sector. Crucially, there should be it's providing for a pathway provision for the state to exercise an option for acquisition of district heating networks. So the state may acquire strategic efficient district heating and cooling networks where it considers to be in the public interest to do so. In all instances where the heat network is not owned by the state and satisfies the criteria of the National Strategic Energy Infrastructure, the heads of the bill provide that the state will retain the right to acquire relevant networks after a 30-year period. Now, obviously, that would have to be independently valued and based on a fair valuation. There'll also be an establishment of a heat network authority, which will oversee the national development of district heating networks, and it'll be responsible for setting out the priority locations for district heating networks. It'll also ensure that the strategic planning of heat networks is established at a national and regional level on a similar basis that the gas and the network electricity networks is done. As it was set out in the steering group report, there will be a mandate on public sector buildings to connect to district heating networks where it's obviously technically feasible and economically feasible. So next slide, we're on to support. So as I said earlier, there's high initial capital costs and long payback periods associated with larger district heating projects. And as I said, it's very much in line. This isn't just an Irish issue. This is across other European countries. So funding is being sought to support projects. They typically seek central government capital support in the initial stages of the development. And it's been identified by project developers and feedback that we've been receiving that the single biggest factor inhibiting the development of project sponsors is funding at this point. And there has been some funding to date. So the Climate Action Fund has funded 2 projects. The project in Tallaght, I'll go into a little bit more detail on that when I go into the project slide. But that's up and running now, and there's also been money made available for the Dublin district heating project, which is already laying pipes in the ground. Government's also making funding available for local authorities for feasibility studies for district heating projects. This has been done through the SEAI Centre of Excellence. We had 5 up and running in 2024, Maynooth, Naas, Arklow, Drogheda and Dundalk, which is great to see, and we're going to make more funding available for projects this year again. Future states, well, what we're looking to do in that situation is really bring projects from conceptual stage up to feasibility, get them onto business case planning, etc., have them ready then for full rollout, so that they can avail of government funding when it's in place. And so the Climate Action Fund was only for local authorities, and that's closed for district heating now. So we are looking to put funding in place for the 2026-2030 time period. And we're working on a business case in relation to that. There's actually 5 different programs under the heat and built environment sector and ceiling, including a national district heating infrastructure business case where we're looking to get funding. And it's proposed that we get put grant funding in place for these projects, very similar to what we've done in relation to the Climate Action Funds. The support scheme for renewable heat, that's an existing scheme that supports non-residential businesses, agriculture, commercial, etc., in relation to their decarbonisation efforts. So that's been identified as the device that we're going to use to roll out grant funding for district heating. So that's undergoing a revamp at the moment. And we hope that that in place as soon as the funding's in place, and that can all be rolled out then in 2026. So that's kind of the support that we have in place and we're looking to put in place for district heating. And just the last slide then is on the project pipeline. So public and privately led projects are being pursued to try to meet our 2030 CAP targets and to build development and delivery capacity in what is almost completely a new sector for Ireland. To date, we've seen projects brought forward by local authorities and private entities. The first one is the Tallaght District Scheme that was sponsored by the Climate Action Fund or supported by the Climate Action Funds. This is a project developed by South Dublin County Council in Tallaght. It actually uses waste heat from a data centre and supplies low carbon heat to customers, including South Dublin County Council and the Technological University of Dublin. And they're actually looking to expand now at the moment to get apartments connected to that network. And then hopefully maybe in the future, the big prize would be Tallaght Hospital there. Dublin District Heating Project, also supported by the Climate Action Fund. The Dublin City Council are working to develop a large project that will use heat from the Dublin Waste to Energy facility in Poolbeg to heat the public sector. There's quite significant momentum behind that project at the moment. There's already pipes going into the ground on the glass bottle site, and they're then looking to expand over the coming years up into the North and South Docklands. Further projects, they're not as far as the Dublin or the Tallaght scheme or the Dublin scheme, but they have already started engaging with customers, anchor loads, mapping out routes for potential district heating networks. So they're just looking to, they're basically on hold at the moment, looking for funding, and we're hoping to fund them then in the 2026-2030 period. Blanchardstown is another one. They've already done their feasibility study, indicated that the scheme out there is both technically and economically viable. And that's been actively progressed now by Fingal County Council, and they're being supported by Codema. Grange Gorman campus, they already have a district heating network out there. They're looking to decarbonise, so they're currently on gas. They're looking to maybe potentially switch to geothermal in the future. And then there's a whole pipeline of further projects, and as I said earlier, we're trying to get as many as them from conceptual stage up to post feasibility and business case and onto planning, and hopefully we can support them in the future to full rollout. So that's me. I hope that gave you a decent overview of where we are in relation to policy and then the implementation through legislation, through funding, and through developing the projects in Ireland, district heating projects. So I'll hand over to Dearbhla.
Thanks for that, Seán. That's a very comprehensive overview of the all of the work that's going on in legislation. So I meant to say at the start, we've over 300 people online. So if we're going to keep questions until the end, and if anyone who's online, if you want to email in your questions, Sinead will take them and we might group them together. So our second speaker is Dearbhla Stapleton. Dearbhla is the head of decarbonised heat at the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. She's a chartered mechanical engineer, one of our own, and she has over 25 years experience, and she's responsible for the new district heat network centre of excellence that Seán mentioned, set up in SEAI. And so they're responsible for working and collaborating with industry to roll out district heat networks in Ireland. So handing over to Dearbhla.
Thanks, Donald, and thanks to Engineers Ireland for the invite. Okay, so I'm going to just cover a bit of, first of all, who SEAI is. I'll present some kind of high-level figures on heat stats and data and insights that we have from our Energy in Ireland report. I'll also give an overview of district heating and the Centre of Excellence, as well as a project case study. So I suppose for those of you who aren't familiar, SEAI is the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. Our mission there is to be at the core of delivering Ireland's energy revolution. And we do this really by providing insights to policymakers and programme designers through research and demonstration, technology expertise, statistics and modelling, consumer behaviour and policy advisory, and we feed that insight into the design of our supports to accelerate action in home and business decarbonisation, but also community activation and public sector leadership. And then we feed the insights and the evaluation back into our policies. So it's quite circular. Every year we publish the Energy in Ireland report, and it's a very comprehensive assessment of where we're using energy in Ireland. So the data in the 2024 report assessed or analysed the 2023 data. So I'm going to present a bit of information from the heat section on this, just to give you an idea where we're at really with heat. So there's three main sectors: heat, electricity, transport. Heat makes up the biggest one of those, with 38% of our emissions from energy at 12 megatons CO2 equivalent. In 2023, it did come down versus 2022. You can see there, heat came down a bit, not enough really. And electricity came down a fair bit, but transport went up. So just looking at the trends really since 2010 there, I won't go into transport and electricity too much. You can see electricity has come down, and you'll understand that that's from the addition of renewables to the grid. Heat has also come down in the last 3 years, every year for the last 3 years, which is quite significant. And also last year, 2023 rather, was the lowest on record at 12 megatons. So we are making progress. There's likely to be a few moving parts on this. You know, it could be to do with higher energy costs, but also slightly warmer winters over the last few years, and there's a whole host of other measures or other things that could impact on that. I suppose the key message though is that we're just not coming down fast enough. This presents really where the heat demand by sector, where the big reductions were, and you can see residential and industry came down fairly significantly. But across all sectors of society, our heat demand was reduced. Looking at the sectoral breakdown, the residential sector accounted for nearly 45%, and combined residential industry was well over 80%. Those other three sectors pretty minimal in comparison. So if you look at where our heat comes from, the bulk of it is oil and gas, with very small portion of renewables at 8%. Last year was the first year that renewables was greater than coal and peat combined. So, a little bit of good news there. But again, progress is being made very slowly. You can see there in the graph on the bottom that that's a time series breakdown of renewable heat. And back 23 years ago, it was predominantly biomass. But over the last 10 years in particular, we have started to add other more diverse sources of renewable heat to the sector. So particularly there, if you see ambient heat has been increasing, and that's really just from the installation of heat pumps, but also biogas, solar thermal and renewable waste have been added to that as well. So where do we stand versus the EU? Well, in the context of the European Union, we currently have the lowest share of energy from renewable energy sources of heat compared to the EU average of 26%. So under RED II, which the Renewable Energy Directive, which Seán mentioned, we're going to have to increase that. There's mandated percentages. I think it's 0.8 for 2021 to 25 and 1.1% increase for the next 5 years. So we're looking at about 15.8% by 2030. So there's an awful lot of work to do to get where we need to be. Looking at district heating across Europe, again, this is the share of renewable energy across Europe, but this time there's a breakdown there of district heating for the various countries, and you can see that countries with high levels of RES-H also have the highest share of district heating. So there is a correlation there. As Seán mentioned, it forms a key part of some EU member states' heat sector. In Ireland, it's very low; it's less than 1%. But if you look at the likes of Denmark, it's over 60%. And in some of those leading countries, Sweden, Latvia, and Estonia, it's very, very high as well. So again, a lot of work to do for us to catch up with even the EU average on this. So what is district heating? Some of you might know this already, but I think it's probably worth illustrating it there. You see, really what district heating or district cooling means, it's the distribution of thermal energy in the form of steam, hot water, or chilled liquids from a central source of production through a network to multiple dwellings, buildings, or sites for the use of space or process heating or cooling. So in this illustration here on the left of the screen, you see the waste heat sources, so potentially the waste to energy plant similar to the one down the Docklands there, or data centres obviously provide a significant opportunity in Ireland. There's also opportunities from wastewater treatment works or industrial premises, and other environmental sources such as geothermal. So you take that waste heat to your energy centre, and you can boost that with a heat pump. You can have alternative sources of energy, for example, biomass boilers or electric boilers, and then you distribute that out throughout your heat users. And typically you would have some large anchor tenants or anchor heat users, rather, for example, public buildings, but also residential, industry, commercial, that kind of thing. You see on the right of the screen there, there's that Tala project that Seán mentioned. At the top there, you'll see there's a data center, and the energy center is right beside that, taking that waste heat from the data center, and it distributes it out then to the university, and ultimately to the new residential development is connecting in there, and in time the hospital as well, ideally. So why would you go with district heating anyway? Well, it can certainly cutting carbon emissions to align with your net zero goals are a priority for Ireland. We have the low carbon bill, and you can do that with district heating because it's a renewable source of heating. It's technology agnostic, and the energy centre can be future proofed. You can switch out future technologies in time. It supports a future low carbon electricity grid via heat storage and demand diversity. There's also improved air quality and maintenance costs for customers. So each customer doesn't necessarily need a boiler or a heat pump in their homes. They have a heat interface unit, so it significantly reduces maintenance costs for them. It's a potentially new market, so there is an employment creation opportunity there. Obviously, there's significant challenges with the amount of infrastructure that needs to be built in Ireland, but these are opportunities that we can grasp, really. There's also reduced dependency on fossil fuels and increased security of supply because you're utilising renewables, and also health and safety benefits, for example, removing gas from someone's house. And then finally, there's the potential for low cost of renewable or waste heat where that's reused. So Seán again mentioned the National Heat Study. I won't go into too much detail here in this. It is available on our website. There's 8 reports if you have a couple of weeks to read through it. It's very interesting. But it did analyse different decarbonisation pathways towards net zero by 2050. And every scenario presented included district heating as a significant, I suppose, support to the decarbonisation of our heat sector. One of the key findings Seán mentioned was over 50% of buildings in Ireland could be met by district heating. Or sorry, over 50% of our heat demand could be met by district heating. District heating is viable above a linear heat density of about 1,000 megawatt hours per kilometre. So as part of the National Heat Study, we developed a heat demand map. It's available there on our website. The link is there. And it's based on the characteristics of the buildings of each individual area, and includes all the buildings in these areas, including public, commercial, residential, and highlights then where the hotspots are in terms of that density of above 1,000 megawatts per kilometre. We also carried out some further analysis and modelled the towns and cities with the highest potential for developing district heating networks. So this is also on our website, and using a spatial model, clusters of census small areas with high heat demand densities were amalgamated into distinct candidate areas for district heating. So you'll see on this map where the higher the heat demand, it's more yellow, and the lower then it's kind of purpley colour. And so here are two proposals, say for this area in Waterford City. Based on the knowledge of the heat demand and a desktop analysis, you can identify the big anchor tenants there that you could have with the hospital and university, and then run your pipes into the other more densely populated areas. So there's a few options there, and we use that data to assist with similar planning all around the country, so local authorities can access this to identify areas that could be potentially district heat, viable for district heating. So I suppose one of the insights that we got from the candidate area mapping is exactly as you'd expect. The higher opportunity areas are places like Dublin City, Cork City, Galway, but also there's significant public sector heat demand in most of those, in most of the areas where there's higher density. And these initial district heating schemes will be heavily dependent on these anchor loads. Looking at the supports for district heat scheme development, obviously we have our national candidate area map, which identified initial areas that were suitable. And then we did further modelling which indicated a large number of areas with potential for district heating. We're also supporting local authorities in pre-feasibility and feasibility assessments. Seán mentioned we're funding that through our Pathfinders grant scheme. And we have a feasibility template, there's an extract from it there on the slide. This supports local authorities to really identify what are the steps that they need to take to demonstrate feasibility and viability of district heating in their areas. So the District Heating Centre of Excellence was established in January 2024 as a result of the recommendations of the District Heating Steering Group. This is a national centre to provide technical expertise to support capacity building across the sector and to support the development of a national district heat strategy. So the defined scope of the Centre of Excellence is to coordinate, support and drive the delivery of district heating projects, support DEC in long-term strategy development, also support project sponsors in sourcing funding, which is absolutely key, provide technical support and staff upskilling to local authorities, support raising public awareness, and develop a technology roadmap to 2030. So I suppose just looking at those individual scope items, really what we've been focused on over the last year since we've been established, I suppose, first of all, we had to recruit people, but we've also, in terms of supporting and driving the delivery of projects, there's a number of projects that we have funded, provided funding for the feasibility assessments, and we've ring-fence funding this year as well to support local authorities in that. We've also, as Seán mentioned, we're preparing a business case for infrastructure, climate and nature funding for district heating from 2026 to 2030. So that's well progressed at the moment. In terms of long-term strategy development, we have supported DEC in the development of the heat bill, primarily through technical advice and guidance on specific aspects related to district heating. And as I mentioned, we have a district heating feasibility template and a how-to guide that we can share with project sponsors. We're also supporting public awareness, I suppose, through events such as this or at our energy show. And finally, we've almost completed the development of a technology roadmap along with the department as well. This outlines the key actions that are needed to deliver our 2.7 terawatt-hour target by 2030. So finally, every year we have our energy awards, and in last year's award was the innovative deployment of renewable energy was won by the Tallaght District Heating Scheme. As well deserved. This scheme reduces emissions in the area by almost 1,500 tons of CO2 per annum. So I'm going to see if this works.
The company will limited guarantee 100% owned by Dublin County Council and is registered as a not-for-profit entity. The concept is very new to Ireland, and the idea is to find a source of heat and automate this to use it. In our case, we take one level that comes from anywhere, servers are cooled down and that heat goes through the heat collectors in the back of this building and brings the hot water with around 27-28 degrees depending on the outdoor temperatures. And then we increase the temperature to the correct level. The hot water is produced and then through the pipes is transported to the buildings in power up to heat those. After the heat is delivered over the buildings, then the temperature drops around 50 degrees and we supply back Amazon with a cold water that has also then to reduce their cost as well. So it's benefits for both. And then water comes back to be heated again, and this is a closed circuit. We have in total connected to surface 55,000 square meters, where it's connected the county hall with the library, innovation center, POD campus, sport building, and also affordable apartments with 133 units. So it's a combination of public and also residential, and we are looking to add more in the future. Education, maybe health and other residential buildings as they come. This local technology that is using the most of heat that otherwise will be released in the nature. So it brings out the gas consumption in those buildings being otherwise heated by fossil fuels. And it's proven already that economic people feel served and they can just enjoy the heat that comes from our facility. The close cooperation of Corona with local authority, Stapleton, county hall, contractors, and central government, they made this project successful.
So if you ever get a chance to visit it, I'd highly recommend it. It's the cleanest energy centre I've ever been in. So that's it for me. Thanks very much. Do you want to hand over to yourself?
Thanks, Dearbhla.